Okay, let's continue. We will probably do a sample turn, but before we do that, just one last thing that I wanted to mention was something that's called a preemption. So if you can see this preemption token here, at any time a player power that has the most number of cards, which is usually France, but not necessarily, they get this preemption token next to them. So let's say France has the most cards, and as soon as it loses and the most cards and another nation has the most cards, they receive the preemption token. But essentially with the preemption token, what it means is that France, essentially before an impulse starts of any other nation, even minor nations, they can choose to preempt that nation and take another impulse. So for example, France plays a card, it still has the most cards, so it keeps the preemption. Then Britain plays a card. Then Austria plays a card. And then, before Russia plays, France says, I want to go again. So France will play another card. And after they finish to play a card, then the impulse goes to Russia. After Russia finishes, France still has the preemption token. They're like, before Prussia goes, we want to go again. Again, they'll play a card, and so on and so forth until they lose the preemption token or it goes to someone else. The only time they cannot preempt is in two cases. One of the nations that they want to preempt ran out of cards, so you can't preempt a nation that doesn't have any cards. And you can never preempt if the preemption causes back-to-back turns. So for example, France can't preempt after Denmark, and France can't preempt, I guess they can't preempt Sweden if Sweden didn't have any cards. So in one of these two cases, they are not allowed to preempt. They can never actually have back-to-back turns. And if there ever comes a close where there's back-to-back turns because they preempted, then they lose their regular turn that they get, their regular impulse. So there can never be a case where there's going to be back-to-back impulses of the same nation. So that's all about the preemption. And now the last thing I wanted to mention is about the peace roll and the interface. And like I said, I'll probably ignore the naval combat because that's really only relevant mostly for France and for Britain, who will be doing a lot of naval combat, but most other nations won't be doing it, at least for the first turn, so it doesn't actually matter for now. The thing that I think is the most important here also to mention is about the two things I wanted to mention was about the peace and the interface. So at the end, the turn actually ends when the last nation that has cards play a card. So let's say everybody ran out of cards, and now it's Austria. Austria has 3 cards left. They will play 1 card for their impulse, and then the turn will be over after that. Unless if by playing that card, by doing so, that will give cards to other nations. And then there will be more than one nation with at least 1 card, and the turn will continue. But other than that, the turn will end. At the end of the turn, every unit that is on enemy space will suffer attrition, and if they survive afterwards, then they can flag that space. In addition to that, there will be checks for subjugation of nations. So that means if you actually took the capital of a nation, so let's assume for a second that France had taken Vienna. If France had taken Vienna, then there will be some kind of roll to see whether the Austrians are actually capitulating to the French, and there's specific rules that pertain to that, but it doesn't matter that much for now. After all of that is done, there will be a peace roll. Basically, the leading nation, the one that's leading in victory points, will roll the die, and if they roll a 6, barring some modifiers from cards and whatnot, then the war will end and they will win. That die roll, like I said, they have to roll a 6, but that die roll can be modified by each nation in turn order. Basically, if they forfeit one of the cards that they will get on the next turn, they can modify that roll with a +1 or a -1. Obviously, they will modify it with a +1 if they're the ones who are going to win, and by -1 if they are the ones who are likely to lose. So that is about the piece roll, the interface, and capitulation, in short. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to that is another thing that happens in the interface is obviously you will get reinforcements. You will get a hefty amount of CPs to just build up, and you will be able to kind of regroup your units as well. And that is essentially it for that particular part. And the last thing I want to mention is the resources. As I said, any resources that you have count as victory points, and you can spend a resource to draw a card. Now, some cards, and that is the last thing we'll talk about, are called reserves. They're not really cards. They're more like invisible cards that are always in your hand. And we can see them here on the top. So Prussia has raised the Landwehr, Britain has the Admiralty and the Parliament cards, the Turk has the Janissaries, Russia has Holy Mother Russia, and so on and so forth. You can always choose to play one of these reserves instead of playing one of your cards during an impulse. And if you do that, usually some of these cards will have a plus symbol on them. That means that they would allow an additional card play. So Russia, for example, can play Holy Mother Russia for the points, 6, and then they can play these overseas allies for the points for 2, and combined they will have 8 points. You're only really allowed a plus play, only one plus play. So they can't, if you look at the resources, for example, at the back of the resources, they say plus. All resource use is a plus play. So they can't spend a resource to draw a card and then play Holy Mother Russia, because that'll be 2 plus plays, and you are only allowed 1 plus play. Think of spending a resource and drawing a card as if you have played a plus card already. And that is essentially it. Then we will do a sample turn, and we'll get right into it.